Marvel is an ever-evolving story. Book after book, you never know what characters are going to pop off the page. Wolverine appeared for the first time in Incredible Hulk. It really is a tradition to bring these characters that resonate with fans to the forefront. And the same is true with Agatha. Agatha was a standout character in WandaVision. She was so beloved, hers was a story that the fans demanded to see more of.
Gang's all here, let's hit the road. I knew from the source material where Agatha goes, and she could go really anywhere, which I'm very excited about.
When Agatha gets out from under Wanda's spell, she has 0 powers. And so the shortcut to getting her power back is to walk the witch's road.
Join me.
In the comics, she's a mentor, she's a mother figure, she's a sister figure, she's a neighbor, she's all the things all at once, which really speaks to Agatha's larger character of always being very slippery of persona.
The Witch's Road was an idea and an element from the comics. In our story, The Witch's Road is a gauntlet.
If you make it to the end, the road will give you the thing you want the most.
There's a lot of possibilities in this witch's brew. It's so crazy.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. Marvel just released a new trailer talking about Agatha Harkness and her connection to the Fantastic Four, where she started in the comics. Kathryn Hahn also talked about crossing over with the MCU Fantastic Four because of her connections with Franklin Richards. They also featured the Midnight Suns during that clip. That's one of the Avengers-style team-ups they're working on for characters like Moon Knight, Ghost Rider, Black Knight, people that won't be like super huge characters on Avengers teams themselves. Like they have separate supernatural team-ups that they're making. The funny thing too, even though this isn't meant to be a Deadpool and Wolverine related video, they also feature some footage from that movie with the John Byrne looking variant of Wolverine getting ready to fight Hulk, talking about a Hulk versus Wolverine movie. They're actually working on pulling that off in a future MCU movie at some point. So we'll break it all down. In big reminder, Agatha episodes 1 and 2 will start this week. I'll be doing videos each week for those episodes. Be sure to subscribe to my channel to get all those. We'll basically be seeing the slow return of Scarlet Witch. Like that's the beginning of them explaining how she can come back in the first place if her body was destroyed during Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. That's why her son Billy is back on the show in teenage form with Joe Locke playing him. But probably the biggest thing here, in addition to Scarlet Witch coming back, like yes, we're all excited to see Elizabeth Olsen come back to the MCU, is Agatha Harkness in the Fantastic Four, just because there's so much Fantastic Four stuff happening next year. Even though most people now think of her in the MCU as a Scarlet Witch character because she debuted during WandaVision in live action, she's actually really a Fantastic Four character. She debuted in issue 94 in 1970. She was actually introduced as quote-unquote the governess and just became the caretaker of Franklin Richards right after he was born, where the Fantastic Four would go on their adventures, so they'd leave her back taking care of him. Part of the reason why she became his nanny, like why she showed up, is that she was the only person on the planet who instantly sensed how powerful he was. Reed Richards, Sue Storm, the others had no idea how powerful he was going to become. So she inserts herself in their family as his caretaker. During her debut, the Frightful Four was the villain of the month. They're like the opposite of the Fantastic Four. They lock them up, then go after Franklin Richards in Agatha as a way to show how powerful she was, basically just snaps her fingers and deals with them instantly with her magic. Then throughout the future Fantastic Four stories that she stuck around for, she would just always be the one to stay back with Franklin while the team went on to fight whoever was the villain of the month, like Doctor Doom, Kang, Galactus. And while the team was busy off fighting whoever the big villain was, they would jump back to her occasionally and just show comedic adventures of her trying to deal with Franklin's tantrums with his extreme powers expressing, just as a way to tease how powerful he would become someday. So Marvel's using this new trailer to connect Agatha Harkness to the other live-action characters, like the new Fantastic Four movie mostly, but the Midnight Suns too as well. They're working on a movie for that eventually. Scarlet Witch's return in the movies. Those aren't the only places that they'll use Agatha in the future. Part of the idea is they want to show you how versatile she's been in the comics and all the places they're thinking about crossing her over in the future movies. I think the more interesting thing is that Kathryn Hahn specifically was talking about crossing over with the Fantastic Four after their first movie because Matt Shakman, who directed WandaVision, where they introduced her character for the first time in the MCU, is also directing the Fantastic Four movies now. The other funny thing about that, they're working on a Scarlet Witch movie in the background too with Elizabeth Olsen. The people that did WandaVision that are doing Agatha right now are also working on that Scarlet Witch movie. So there's just like a lot of Scarlet Witch WandaVision energy from all those characters all over the MCU right now, connecting to a bunch of different places, even the Fantastic Four. But Catherine Hahn was talking about her character's longtime connection with Franklin Richards and how she wanted to do that in live action now that we're going to be getting Franklin Richards in the new movie. Part of the reason why they couldn't cross her over with them before is because, like, literally they had not done them in the MCU yet. There was a brief reference to there being an MCU Fantastic Four in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. For example, like, this is kind of a weird thing. Maybe they'll explain this in the future.
Hello, Stephen. Fantastic Four. Didn't you guys chart in the 60s?
But when the Illuminati get Doctor Strange and he makes the joke about Fantastic Four to the John Krasinski Reed Richards, didn't you guys chart back in the 60s was meant to be a Fantastic Four reference because there was like a real life musical group in the 1960s, but it's also meant to be a sly Fantastic Four team reference because they debuted in the 1960s in the comics. Also, the new Pedro Pascal version of the Fantastic Four come from the 1960s in their universe too. But the idea is that if Doctor Strange had heard of the Fantastic Four in the MCU, it means theoretically there might have been a Fantastic Four at some point in the 1960s of the MCU. Just one of those loose threads that Marvel can choose to explore in the future if they want with this new Fantastic Four team. But the other big reason why you didn't see them making a ton of Fantastic Four references when Agatha first showed up in WandaVision was because this new Fantastic Four live-action movie is going to take place mostly in another universe, like their team will come from a completely different universe, so theoretically she could not have crossed over with them yet. And that movie is also going to feature the birth of Franklin Richards, so if she's really connected to Franklin Richards, it didn't make that much sense to cross her over with Fantastic Four until Franklin Richards had debuted as a character in live action. The reason why she's talking about crossing over with them in the future is because during their movie, at some point they're supposed to come to the MCU, traveling across universes. They haven't fully explained how that's going to go down because they're supposed to show up in Avengers 5 Doomsday and Avengers 6 Secret Wars. So at some point between the end of their movie and the beginning of Avengers 5, they will make their way to the MCU. We've also been talking a lot about Robert Downey Jr. coming back to the MCU as Doctor Doom, but supposedly he's going to debut for the first time in live action at the end of that new Fantastic Four movie, and supposedly they're kind of implying that he's the main Doctor Doom of that universe. I've already done a much bigger trailer video for like the D23 and the Comic-Con Fantastic Four trailer, so I'll post a link for that at the end of this. But during that, there's all kinds of Easter eggs for Galactus, Franklin Richards, as well as Stan Lee and Jack Kirby references to stuff in real life for their original debut in the 1960s, around the time the movie is supposed to take place in the timeline of that universe. It's meant to feel like a very retro futurism kind of movie, kind of vibe. You have to think of them eventually traveling to the present day of the MCU, sort of like Captain America when he came out of the ice from the 1940s. People from the past suddenly being shoved together with characters from present day. Captain America understood that reference. So my assumption is if all those characters are coming to the MCU by Avengers 5, then Agatha probably won't be crossing over with the Fantastic Four or Franklin Richards until like Marvel Phase 7. They'll probably save that till like after Secret Wars because there's so much stuff going on between Avengers 5 and Avengers 6. So you can understand why Marvel was just kind of pumping the brakes on Agatha, making a ton of Fantastic Four references, Franklin Richards references, until they'd fully introduced those characters in that first big movie. Marvel hasn't really said how quickly they're planning on aging Franklin Richards up after his first Fantastic Four movie. Like, he's going to be born during that movie, but how quickly will he grow? My assumption is that they typically try to make things seem like they move in real time through the different Marvel movies. By the end of Secret Wars, he'll be a couple years old and he'll be able to speak normally with the other characters. Early theory is because they probably want to use his reality warping powers to help fix the multiverse at the end of Secret Wars, like they did at the more recent version of the comic book Secret Wars. My other early theory too, because obviously we're talking about Agatha here, Scarlet Witch coming back to the MCU, is they always change the comics to fit the movie characters. And at the end of the more recent Secret Wars, it was more of a Fantastic Four kind of story of fixing the universe. Reed Richards using Franklin Richards' power to create whole universes and just recreate each different universe of the multiverse. But in the MCU version of Secret Wars, they'll probably also rely on Scarlet Witch's reality warping chaos magic powers, because the comic book version, Scarlet Witch wasn't really that big of a character, and the movies treat Elizabeth Olsen's Scarlet Witch like she's a much more powerful, much more central figure. So it feels like much more of the plot would rely on some of her key abilities of reality warping and creating things. Agatha did make a couple Fantastic Four references during WandaVision, like she joked about being a nanny. That was meant to be a callback to her Fantastic Four origin story. They mostly used it for comedy though, like I Bit a Kid once. She also jokes about eating babies in the newer Agatha trailers, but that's more of a joke on old myths about witches eating children. You do kind of wonder for a hot second if she could be telling the truth a little bit, because she's been pretty evil in the history of the MCU. She's more of an anti-hero during the Agatha series, just because she's meant to be the hero of that series, but she's more of an anti-hero. They have made a bunch of changes for the live-action version from the comic book version. Originally in the Fantastic Four comics, they explained she was over 10,000 years old. In the MCU version, she was born in the late 1600s and lived through the Salem witch trials until she eventually killed her mother's coven, taking their powers. Then she used her ability to steal magical power from other beings to keep herself young over the hundreds of years to present day, the events of WandaVision and now Agatha. So it's their way of saying that technically she is this wise old lady, like the comic book version, but just in a younger, hotter looking body. That's also part of Marvel's whole thing in the movies recently, the last several years, making the older female characters seem younger and hotter with each new reboot. Aunt May in the Spider-Man movies is the best example of this phenomenon. You start with Tobey Maguire's Aunt May, who is very much the classical example of a sweet old grandma lady, like an aunt in Peter's case. Then you get to Andrew Garfield's Aunt May, who's recast with a slightly younger, but still on the older side. Then you get to MCU Tom Holland's Aunt May, and it's Marissa Tomei, who even though she's hitting her 60s now, like I think she's about 60 years old, is affectionately nicknamed Aunt Bay because she's so young and good looking. They even had that whole comedy storyline in those movies with Happy Hogan trying to romance her. So RIP to Aunt Bay. Someday they'll reboot Spider-Man again in like 30 or 40 years, and it'll be like a teenage version of Aunt May. They just did the same thing in Marvel Comics with Agatha Harkness, so like comic book Agatha Harkness is also now super young looking, like the live-action MCU version. Part of the reason why they introduced her during WandaVision and not just waited for like the Fantastic Four movie is because they wanted more witch-based characters for Scarlet Witch to fight, and because she's the reason why Scarlet Witch and Vision were able to have kids in the comics originally. After she debuted in the Fantastic Four in the 70s, a couple years after that, she crossed over into the Avengers comics and became Scarlet Witch's tutor in magic. Many years after that, they did the Scarlet Witch and Vision comics where they dealt with like their life being married together. They fought the Salem Seven, who were connected to Nicholas Scratch, Agatha's son. Agatha was seemingly killed, but her astral energy survived. Scarlet Witch channeled that energy into herself, using it to become pregnant with her and Vision's children. WandaVision was basically the story of how she created her children, but on the show, Agatha didn't have anything to do with that. She just created them whole cloth with her chaos magic. During the Agatha episodes, they'll explain how Billy is back in a teenage body that looks totally different from the young version of Billy, if he was also destroyed when she brought the Hex down. And they're going to explain how Scarlet Witch is going to come back to the MCU during that series. There'll be a lot of Easter eggs and references to all this episode to episode, so I'll point those out when I post my episode videos. Be sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss any of that. Everybody click here for that full Fantastic Four trailer breakdown and learn what's going on during that movie. And speaking of people coming back to the MCU, click here to learn about the Defenders all coming back to the MCU. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.